I woke up to the sound of hissing and the sharp stench of chemical cleaner drifting through my open window. Rushing outside, barefoot, heart-pounding, I found my Mustang drenched in foamy white spray, and standing there, smug and unbothered, was Linda, the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA, clutching an empty bottle like a trophy. "This trashy old car doesn't belong in my neighborhood," she sneered, as if vandalism was just civic duty. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just dealing with a neighbor, I was facing a tyrant in pearls and beige. The late afternoon sun stretched golden fingers across the quiet suburban street as I polished the hood of my Mustang. The paint glimmered like molten candy apple under the fading light. The scent of fresh-cut grass hung in the warm air. Birds chirped lazily. My cloth glided over chrome and steel, every motion connecting me to the memory of my father. He had loved this car, a 1967 Ford Mustang GT, cherry red, loud, beautiful, untamed. It wasn't just a car. It was legacy. It was pride. It was the only thing he left me when he passed. And today, it looked flawless. Then came the voice, that shrill, grating sound that could slice through concrete. "Are you seriously still keeping that thing in our neighborhood?" I froze, the cloth in my hand stilled mid-wipe. I already knew who it was: Linda Kessler, HOA president, neighborhood dictator entitled Queen of All Things. Beige she stood on her porch, in her usual white tennis skirt and pink visor, clutching a clipboard like it was a scepter. Her lips pursed like she smelled something rotten. "I've received more complaints," she said, as she crossed her arms and took a step onto the sidewalk. "That car is an eyesore." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked back at the car, clean classic. "Perfect, Linda. It's a vintage Mustang," I said, finally keeping my tone measured. "It's not junk. It's a collector's car," she snorted. "It's trashy," she said, old, loud, and tacky. "We have standards here. This is not a used car lot." I opened my mouth to respond, but she cut me off. "Section 7-B of the HOA Covenant," she said, tapping the clipboard. "All visible vehicles must contribute positively to the visual harmony of the neighborhood." "Visual harmony," I repeated. "That's subjective, don't you think?" "Not when I'm the one interpreting it," she said, with a smug smile. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't the first time Linda had come after me. She had already left 3 warnings in my mailbox since I moved in 2 months ago. First it was the trash bins being out for 10 extra minutes, then it was the mailbox being non-standard because it had a silver flag instead of black. Now it was my father's Mustang. "Unless you can garage it permanently," she said, "you'll be receiving a formal notice and a fine by the end of the week. You can't fine me for owning a car you don't like." She smiled again. "Watch me." Her eyes seemed to say. I took a slow breath and wiped the last streak from the windshield. She turned and walked back up her pristine driveway, muttering about standards and property value. I watched her go. Every step of hers radiated a sense of control, entitlement, power. She ruled this place with a white smile and a poison pen, and I was just her next target. The next day, a letter arrived from the HOA violation notice: improper vehicle storage, $500. I stared at it for a long time before folding it in half and tossing it onto the counter. That night, I walked into the garage, opened the hood, checked every inch for leaks. Clean as ever, no oil, no rust, just raw mechanical beauty. The next morning, I parked in my driveway, as usual, and later found a deep scratch across the driver's side door. Not a dent, not an accident, a clean, deliberate key mark. I felt something twist in my chest as I ran a finger over it. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This was personal. I didn't have proof. No cameras, no witnesses, but I knew exactly who did it. I looked across the street. Linda stood beside her hedge, trimming a perfectly round bush. She didn't look up, but I saw the smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. I walked over, tried to stay calm. "Linda, someone keyed my car. Last night?" She raised her brows. "Really?" she said, with mock surprise. "Well, that's what happens when you leave junk lying around." "Do you have cameras?" I asked. "No," she said, then turned back to her hedge. "But I do hope the person who did it gets a medal." My fingers curled into fists at my sides. "That's vandalism," I said, "and you're encouraging it." "I'm just stating facts," she said, still not looking at me. "It's not my fault your car attracts trouble." She clipped a final leaf and walked back to her porch, like the conversation never happened. The worst part was how casual she was about it. Like my life. My memories meant nothing. The following week, I tried reasoning with the HOA board, tried to explain that my car was clean safe historically. Significant even. They listened politely, smiled gently, and told me that if Linda had issued a citation, it would be upheld, unless I could prove a violation didn't occur. Burden of proof was on me. I left that meeting feeling smaller than I had in years. My home was supposed to be a place of peace, a place to breathe again, after losing my dad and leaving behind the chaos of my old life. But now it was a war zone, with a tyrant in yoga pants pulling the strings. That night, I sat on my porch watching the sun dip behind the roofs of the neighborhood. The Mustang gleamed quietly in the driveway, beside me scratched. But still proud, I ran my hand over the wheel. Well, I wasn't giving up. Not yet. She had power, sure. But I had patience. And something she didn't, a reason to fight. Let her laugh. Now. Let her smirk. Let her find me and scream and strut across the sidewalks like she owned them, because I had a plan starting to form. A way to beat her at her own game. But for now, I sat in the fading light, the Mustang, humming softly as the engine cooled, waiting, watching, knowing this was just the beginning, and the war had only just begun. 2 mornings later, I opened my front door to find a bright orange sticker slapped across my windshield. It was neon and obnoxious, and impossible to miss. The words "non-compliant vehicle" screamed across the front in block letters. My pulse surged, peeled it off slowly, careful not to leave residue behind, then walked straight to the HOA office 3 blocks down, next to the community pool inside. It was sterile and cold like a dentist's waiting room. Artificial flowers lined the counter. Linda sat behind the desk, as if she were queen of a paper kingdom, flipping through a file without even glancing up. "You tagged my car," I said flatly, holding the sticker in the air. She looked up slowly, with a smirk. "You were warned," she said in a syrupy voice multiple times. "I even gave you extra days out of kindness." "You mean spite." Her smile didn't waver. "This isn't personal," she said. "It's about keeping our neighborhood beautiful. Rules are rules. My car is clean, registered, safe, legal, just old." "Exactly," she said, her tone sharp. "It draws the wrong kind of attention." I narrowed my eyes, The wrong kind. She leaned forward, lacing her fingers together like a villain in a low-budget soap opera. This neighborhood is meant to attract professionals' families, homeowners who care about standards, not people who bring down property value with muscle cars and greasy driveways. I don't even work on it outside, I said, my voice rising. It's never leaked anything. You're making this up because you don't like me. No, she said with icy finality. I'm enforcing policy. I left the office with a storm swirling in my chest. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet tick of the clock and the occasional gust of wind against the window. My mind kept circling back to her smug face, the way she enjoyed it, like she'd won some private game. I didn't even agree to play. She wanted control fine, but I had something she didn't: technology. The next day, I installed a discreet security camera on my porch, angled toward the driveway. It was small, black, wireless, and perfectly legal. Linda could spy with her clipboard all she wanted. But now I was watching too, and it didn't take long. 3 nights later at exactly 2 a.m. My phone buzzed with a motion alert. I pulled up the feed, half asleep, heart hammering, and there she was, Linda, in her robe and slippers, crouched next to my Mustang, with something in her hand she was spraying. Something on my windshield? I couldn't believe it. She finished in 10 seconds and scurried back to her house like a rat with a mission. In the morning, my windshield was covered in some kind of foamy glue. Thick, cloudy, and hardening fast. I took photos from every angle, then saved the video clip on multiple devices. My hands shook with adrenaline. This wasn't HOA business anymore. This was criminal. I emailed the footage to the HOA board that afternoon with a short message attached. Vandalism caught. On camera, delivered it to the police too. Linda didn't know it yet, but the game had changed. That evening, as I stood outside drying the Mustang again, she strutted past, holding her little white poodle like a trophy. She looked me up and down with her usual sneer. You're still here, she said. How persistent. It's almost cute. I just smiled. Hope your night walks don't lead you into any trouble, Linda. She paused, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, shrugging. Just saying cameras are everywhere these days. You never know who's watching. She looked rattled for the first time. The tiniest flicker of doubt crossed her face before she turned sharply and walked off. For once her heels didn't click so confidently. The next morning, I received an email from the HOA board. Formal apology. They had reviewed the footage. Linda had acted independently and without board approval. They assured me she would be investigated and appropriate action would be taken. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted justice. I wanted her to feel what I felt: targeted, belittled, helpless. So I started researching. I dug through HOA laws, public records, online forums. Linda had been president of the HOA for over 10 years. She kept her power by intimidating anyone who opposed her. But here was the thing. She wasn't untouchable. She had violated the rules she claimed to protect. And I had proof. I spoke with 3 neighbors. One had been fined for putting out Halloween decorations before October. Another had received weekly citations for a perfectly legal patio umbrella. And the third, an elderly woman named Doris, whispered that Linda once threatened to evict her cat for being too visible from the sidewalk. Each of them had stories. Each of them had fear in their eyes. But now that someone had footage, now that someone pushed back, they were ready to talk. I organized a small meeting in my garage. 6 neighbors showed up. We shared stories, exchanged documents, compared fines patterns, emerged selective enforcement, retaliation, abuse of authority. And it all pointed back to her Linda, the tyrant in pearls. The HOA board was hesitant at first, but the pressure grew. One neighbor threatened to go to the local news. Another mentioned a lawsuit. They had seen the footage, too. Her smug little walk under the moonlight, her criminal act, her obsession with control. The walls around her kingdom were cracking, and she knew it. She stopped walking her dog past my house. She stopped making eye contact. She even stopped showing up at HOA meetings. But I wasn't done. I wanted the final blow. To be loud, undeniable, and poetic, I submitted a formal petition to remove her from office. I included the video evidence witness testimonies and a signed complaint from every neighbor she had harassed. The board had no choice but to review it and set a date for a public hearing a week from Thursday in the community center where everyone would be watching, where she couldn't hide. As I stood in my garage, polishing the Mustang for the 100th time, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't just about my car anymore. It was about every quiet neighbor she had trampled, every fine, every threat, every manipulative smile. This time, she wouldn't walk away. Not quietly, not cleanly, not ever again. The community center was packed. Folding chairs lined the polished floor in rows filled with neighbors clutching coffee cups and HOA documents and nervous energy. The air buzzed with quiet whispers and curious stares. At the front sat the 5 board members, their nameplates neatly aligned, their faces unreadable. Linda entered 15 minutes late. She wore a beige blazer and pearls, and her expression was one of forced calm, but her eyes were darting, scanning the room like a cornered animal. She hadn't expected this many people. She hadn't expected the tide to turn. She took her seat near the front, 2 rows away from me, and for a moment, our eyes locked. Hers were cold, calculating, full of disdain. Mine didn't flinch. The board president cleared his throat and called the meeting to order. He read the petition aloud, a formal request for the removal of Linda Kessler from the HOA presidency due to misconduct, abuse of power, and criminal behavior, documented with visual evidence and community testimony. The words echoed through the hall like a verdict. Gasps rippled. Someone dropped their coffee. Linda stood abruptly. "This is absurd," she said loudly, her voice trembling just slightly. "This is a smear campaign by one bitter man with a junkyard." Carr, the board president, held up a hand. "Miss Kessler, you will have a chance to respond. But first, we'll present the evidence." He gestured toward the projector screen behind him, and there it was, in crisp color and perfect clarity. The video I had captured from my porch, cam Linda in her robe, spraying my windshield with foam under cover of night. The image froze on her face, lit up by the porch light. There was no denying it, no angle to twist it into something innocent. The room went silent. Then a few whispers, then murmurs of disbelief and recognition. One neighbor leaned to another and said, "I knew it." Linda sat down slowly, her face pale now, her fingers tightening on the chair arms. The board presented witness statements. Next, Mr. Salazar's fine for his patio. Umbrella, Doris's cat. Citation: Kerren from down the street, who had been fined 4 times in 1 month for having colorful garden gnomes. Each story layered over the last, like bricks building a damming wall. Each one a reminder that this woman had ruled by fear, and her reign was ending. Finally, they opened the floor. People stood one after another, telling their stories, some angry, some tearful, but all united by a common thread. They had been silenced before, But not now. Now the truth had weight, and it crushed her. Linda tried to speak again, tried to shift blame. She claimed she had been protecting property values, that she had acted in everyone's best interest, that she had been targeted by a conspiracy of malcontents. But no one was buying it. Even her voice cracked near the end. For the first time she looked smaller, less like a monarch, more like a petty tyrant stripped of her illusion. The board president stood and adjusted his glasses. He announced that effective immediately, Linda Kessler would be suspended pending formal investigation. The room broke into murmurs again, but then something unexpected happened. 2 police officers entered through the back doors. They didn't rush, didn't make a scene, just walked with quiet purpose up to where Linda was still sitting, frozen in her chair. "Ma'am," one said, holding up a clipboard, "we need to speak with you regarding an incident of property damage." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood slowly, stiffly, and followed them without a word. The entire room watched as she was led out, her shoulders rigid, her steps no longer. Confident, a few people clapped softly, then louder. Then it spread. Applause, not wild or vengeful, but relieved, cleansing, final. I stepped outside into the evening air, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I leaned against the Mustang, which gleamed. Under the setting sun, the scratch on its side now buffed into near invisibility. I wasn't a fighter by nature. I never looked for battles, but this one had found me, and I had stood my ground. The next day, Linda's name was removed from all HOA documentation. New interim president was appointed, someone reasonable, someone fair. The ridiculous citations disappeared. The orange sticker rule was repealed. Even the mailbox color clause was reviewed. It was like a cloud had lifted from the entire street. Neighbors started waving to each other again. Children played without being told their bikes were visual obstructions, and the Mustang remained proudly in my driveway, a symbol now not of defiance, but of victory. A few days later, Doris brought me cookies. She smiled as she handed them over and said, "I always liked that car. Reminds me of my husband's old Camaro." I thanked her, and for a while everything felt right. But I wasn't quite done. Not yet, because Linda still had one last card to play. And I knew she wouldn't go quietly forever. She was prideful and calculating, and something told me she'd try to twist the story, rewrite it in her favor. But I was ready, because justice wasn't just about punishing someone. It was about making sure they didn't rise again to hurt others, and my next move would make sure of that. 2 weeks passed, and I almost believed it was over. The sun was out more often, the street quieter, and life seemed to breathe easy again. But then the letter came, unmarked envelope. No return address, just slipped into my mailbox, like a whisper inside. Was a printed page full of legal jargon and threats. Linda was filing a defamation suit against me and demanding compensation for emotional distress, loss of position, and public humiliation. I read it 3 times, each word pulsing with her arrogance. She was trying to flip the narrative, cast herself as the victim, and make me the villain. I sat in my garage, the letter in one hand, the other resting on the Mustang's fender. She wasn't done, but neither was I, and this time I was going to make sure she had no ground left to stand on. I called every neighbor who had spoken up. We gathered again, this time not in secret, but openly on Doris's porch, in broad daylight. We passed the letter around. Everyone read it, and no one was surprised. This was who she was: vindictive, relentless, unwilling to admit defeat. So I proposed something. If she wanted a battle in public, then we would give her one. I created a website called The Real HOA: Truth, Simple, Clean, Full of Facts and Evidence. The video was the main banner below. It were scanned citations, stories from neighbors, timelines of events, screenshots of her threatening emails, even her own recorded words from HOA meetings. We kept it factual, no insults, just truth unfiltered and undeniable. The site went live at midnight. By morning, it had 3,000 views. By afternoon, it was trending locally. By evening, a news van was parked on the corner, interviewing Doris as she held up her garden gnome like a badge of honor. Linda tried to deny everything again, posted a long rant on her personal Facebook page calling us liars and cowards and manipulators, but that only made things worse. Someone found her old tweets, cruel posts about neighbors, mocking the elderly, criticizing kids, complaining about diversity in the neighborhood. Screenshots flooded the site. Her lawsuit fell apart within a week. Her lawyer withdrew, citing conflict of interest. The court rejected the case, citing lack of merit and obvious public retaliation. But that wasn't the climax. That came at the town's monthly Open Forum, a community event held in the public park near the lake. I hadn't planned to attend, but when I heard Linda was speaking, I knew I had to be there. The crowd was larger than usual, lawn chairs everywhere, kids running around, coolers of soda popping. Open. When Linda stepped up to the microphone, the murmurs began. She wore her usual pearls, but her expression was tense. Her smile tight. She cleared her throat and began reading a prepared statement about her years of service, her dedication, and how she had been unfairly targeted. She called the website a smear machine, and me a cyberbully. She spoke of pain and betrayal, and how the neighborhood owed her respect. Then something unexpected happened. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, walked up holding. A signet was handmade in crayon. It said, "Let my mom have her gnomes." The crowd laughed gently and warmly. Linda faltered. Then Doris stood from her folding chair, walked to the front, and raised a second sign that said, "Justice for the Mustang." Someone clapped. Then another. And then the applause built into a standing ovation. Not for Linda, for us, for truth, for community. Linda froze. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, and she dropped her paper. For a moment, she looked around as if seeing the truth for the first time. No one stood with her, not even the board. She stepped back from the microphone and left without another word, her heels crunching on the gravel path like the final punctuation mark on a long, toxic chapter. I stood near the Mustang, parked just outside the field, and watched her go. The car gleamed in the twilight, its hood still warm from the drive. Neighbors came up, thanked me, shook my hand, slapped my back, offered beers. Someone suggested a car show in the cul-de-sac. Doris said she'd bake again. And for the first time since all this started, I felt not just vindicated, but part of something larger, not a fight, a community, a living, breathing neighborhood, finally free of fear. That night, I uploaded one final post to the website. It was a photo of the Mustang, with a simple caption, "Still here, still beautiful, still legal." The image went viral. Someone turned it into a meme: Linda's silhouette, walking away in the background with the words, "Kerren left the chat," written underneath. Even I laughed, because in the end, she wasn't just beaten, she was undone by her own need for power. And I hadn't just won a war, I had reclaimed peace. The kind that hums in your chest when you stand in your driveway on a cool evening with the rumble of an old engine beside you. And the knowledge that when pushed too far, even quiet people can roar.